Welcome, everybody. This is Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we bring you folks who are doing all sorts of different things to improve their world, whether that's locally, globally, or in our case, digitally. Rotary International is an organization with 1.4 million Rotarians and Rotaractors around the world, and that's a lot of people interested in making the world a better place. What we like to do in our club is find folks who have stories related to innovation, entrepreneurship, and education, or anything that's just pretty darn cool. And we asked them to tell us about the work they are doing. And today we have with us Melissa Kim. And Melissa is the Vice President of Research and Development at Perimeter Solutions, and we'll talk about fire retardant technology and its advances over the last 60 years. We're excited to talk about a very timely topic. And Melissa, I hand the microphone over to you. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Silicon Valley.
Thank you for having me. So again, like we mentioned, I'm from Perimeter Solutions, and we develop the FOSS-check products that you see that come out of airplanes. The red stuff that comes out of airplanes, that's what we do. That's what we're known for. With the challenges of the wildfire season, what have we done over the years to really address those needs? So a little bit of background. I've been doing this for almost 19 years. I have a little bit of a funny background story, but this was not my first career. Actually, this was my first career. I wasn't supposed to be in this career. I kind of fell into it. And we kind of have a saying that this kind of industry gets in your blood. So I've been here ever since. I'm responsible for product development worldwide. I actually have 3 labs that I'm responsible that do an amazing job, not just with fire retardants you see coming out of aircraft, but other products that we manufacture and produce. We have a full line of products. It's not just the FOSS-check line, but a Solberg, Fire Troll, Oxchemia line of fire safety products. As you mentioned, we've been around for 60 years and we're sold around the world. We were just listed on the New York Stock Exchange last November. So exciting times for us. We continue to grow every year. So there's 3 main, things that Perimeter Solutions really focus on, and that is experience, responsibility, and integrity. The first experience, like you mentioned, 60 years. Actually, next year will be our 60th anniversary. We're all super excited. It's a huge milestone for us. We've worked side by side with agency folks, with firefighters, with the firefighting community really for the last 60 years to bring the best products, the most effective, the safest into industry. Responsibility and integrity, I really feel like these two kind of go hand in hand. We're a small piece of the bigger picture here. We develop products, we offer products, but you have the ground crews and you have the other firefighting community like pilots and the agency people, and we really work side by side with them to develop the best products available, the most effective, the safest, and we really want to make sure that we're doing our part to be able to introduce these products into the marketplace in a safe manner. So fire season is no longer a season. I've been hearing more and more recently that it's really not a fire season, but it's a year-long issue. The temperature is getting higher, the droughts are increasing, the forest health is declining, and all this is contributing to really these year-long, not even a fire season, but really year-long crisis of wildfires. And so, as you can see, some of these statistics, 1.6 billion metric tons globally in 2021 of CO2 emissions. Wildfire smoke kills 33,000 people a year. The growth of the wildland-urban interface with these communities that are being built closer to the forest altogether, that's increasing danger to communities and people. And so we're really looking for improved solutions to tackle these increasing fires. And it's really not just a North American issue. Sometimes wherever you're located, that's what you see. That's where you see the fires. But really, there's been a devastating fire season in Europe this year, Australia, and it really is a worldwide issue. The number of high-risk fire days per year has increased significantly over the last couple of years, and it continues to grow. So this is where we kind of get into some of what have we done over the last 60 years. So the effectiveness of phosphate-based products has really been studied for the last 80 years. There's 3 major studies: the University of Idaho, Operation Firestop, and the Blakely Report. And there's still studies that are continuing on today. You can look up recent studies, but these were the really first ones that really looked at decreasing the combustibility and the fire intensity of fires and what chemicals really were the most effective. And out of all three of these reports, ammonium phosphates came out on top. That was the most effective. All these studies are still available today. You can read them. And so we took that information and we decided, okay, let's use the most effective product there is, phosphates. And so how do fire retardants work? So phosphate fire retardants, this is what all of our PhosCheck based products are based off of. And they actually work chemically by altering the way that the cellulose or the fuel decomposes, and it renders the fuel non-flammable. So untreated cellulose will decompose and it will turn into flammable gases, and then catch on fire. Treated cellulose actually dehydrates and it turns into carbon and water. So the carbon becomes like a carbon char that is actually non-flammable. And then in this video that I'll show, you'll see some white smoke coming off. That's water. And that actually cools the fire within itself. And all of these products, phosphates, are effective dry. So water, when you're seeing it coming out of the aircraft, it's actually it's a solution. It's not a powder. And that's just to get it to the ground. So high velocity aircraft, liquid coming out, it helps get that to the ground and to facilitate coverage on the fuel that you're trying to protect. And it actually remains effective until it's removed by a significant rainfall. And so in this video, you'll see 3 different kind of applications. The top 2 are 2 of our most common fire retardants. The bottom is untreated. You'll see that this is Excelsior fuel, which is a kind of a fine shaved a woodsy fuel. And you'll see at the beginning that's untreated, and that's where the fire is lit. And then it kind of goes into the treated area, and you'll actually see the carbon char that remains and it stays intact, where the untreated material turns completely to ash. And that's the power of phosphates. That's what makes this product so great. And then there's a second video where we use our prevention and protection products, our ground applied products, and that's an uncolored product. So even though it looks like it's untreated, it's still the same effective products, and it still uses that same phosphate chemistry. I never get tired of the airplane pictures, but that's a good description of how our phosphates work. And that's the only chemical in the world that will actually do that. There's been reports of forests where the tree on the outside would be all black and it looks dead, but actually it's still live on the inside. And so that's what phosphates do. So history of an evolution of retardants came about, and where we are today through innovation. In 1963, the first phosphate products were commercialized. And at that time was the first gum thickened retardant. And this was important because prior to that, they were using water, or you might read about some clay thickened products. And what happened is these products are getting delivered out of the high velocity aircraft. And once that gate's released, you're getting a high amount of shear. So with water or anything that's not gum thickened, that just drifts. So you may get 10% of that initial load on your target on the fuel where you need it to be, but it's high wind, it's hot, you're getting these vaporization of these particles. So gum thickened retardants were really introduced to make sure that recovery on the ground was increased, and it did. It increased it to about 90%. So that way you can get the product where you needed it to be. So that was a really big innovation step there. 1971 was our first PhosCheck 259 product, which was the first and only retardant to be approved for fixed tank helicopters. There's different aircrafts that are used for the application of retardant. One of, you have the fixed wing aircraft, the planes have different types of helicopters, but this particular helicopter has the tank that's embedded on the actual aircraft itself. And so with that, you have magnesium parts that are associated with those particular type of aircraft. And this product actually met the stringent requirements for corrosion for magnesium. The U.S. Forest Service, they actually have a specification that your products must meet in order to get on the qualified products list. And one of those is corrosion testing. And it's very It's probably the most significant test that we do to make sure that the product is not going to harm any of the aircraft. This 259 product was also the first ground approved applied fire retardant, something that was another tool that you don't necessarily need an aircraft to apply it, but you can use ground applied. In 1975 was the introduction of fugitive colored retardants. Prior to that, the products were either uncolored or they were iron oxide colored. And iron oxide is very staining and it doesn't go away. And the story goes that there was a fire in a national park and the person in charge of managing that fire said, I'd rather have a black forest than a red forest. And so they didn't want to use the fire retardant that was available at that time. And so we took that very personally and said, okay, how can we offer a tool that they'll want to use and that it's visible on the ground and then fades over time? And that's what we developed, and it's known as our fugitive colored products. So it will fade over time with UV degradation. In 1985 was the introduction of sulfate ammonium phosphate blends. And then in 1999 was the introduction of LC95A. And this was the first gum thickened liquid concentrate. Prior to that, all the products have been powder based. You mix it with liquid and then that's what gets used. And this was our first liquid concentrate, again, to improve that drop characteristic of the retardant onto the ground. And so that's where the liquid concentrate gum thickened products came in. And then in 2010, we had PhosCheck P100F. This was really the first all phosphate powder product that was designed for fixed wing aircraft for the airplanes. And this came about due to a change in the specification. The Forest Service at this time decided they didn't want to use ammonium sulfate products. And so that became a non-usable ingredient in retardants. And so we had to reformulate to eliminate that and still meet the rest of the specification. And so that's where that first all phosphate product came into play. In 2015, we moved on to MVP-FX, which is actually one of our current products. And this was a medium viscosity product, but an ultra high visibility. So it was a fugitive, but with a little flare, a little X on there. So FX, extra visible. And really the feedback that we had been getting was that the fugitive was great. It faded fine, but it was very difficult to see. And so as a pilot, smoky conditions, windy conditions, different fuel types, different colors, they would lay the line down and then they really had a hard time tying the next load into that previously laid line. And so, you run the risk of fire getting into that gap. You have to tie the lines in or, the containment line is then compromised. And then in 2016, we carried that over to our other products. 259FX got this new improved color. But at that time, we weren't just satisfied, let's just improve the color. What else can we change? And really that's where let's have a more effective product, lower mix ratio, lower environmental footprint. So we kind of combined and did everything we could in changing that product over once again. And then 2020, PhosCheck LC20FX, which was a superior performance, again, with a lower environmental footprint. This is carrying again that FX color. We got really good reviews about that color. So we said, why not change everything over to that? They really liked it. It was very visible. And this was a new liquid concentrate for us, again, improving on that performance, overall stability, handling, things of that nature. And then in 2021 was really the PhosCheck Fortify and PhosCheck LC20W, ground applied retardants for our pre-treatment and prevention and protection applications. We really wanted another tool in the toolbox, something that we can offer those who don't have access to airplanes on a regular roadsides. Where are the starts? Where are the high ignition points? Can we spray it on the side of the road before fires get out of control and become these mega fires? So utility companies, homeowners, this made it more accessible for others other than the U.S. Forest Service, state agencies that were using this on aerial applications. And so over the last 60 years, we've had all these innovation steps and this improvement in products. And it's not just us in a lab in a bubble coming up with these ideas. It's a specification change. It's somebody on a forest saying, I don't want I don't want a red forest, I want a black forest. People on the ground. It's really, again, as I mentioned, we're part of this community where we're working with the pilots, we're working with the ground crews and the agencies and doing our part and how we can all work together for this huge catastrophe of a wildfire event and how little pieces work together. And so the innovation really comes from anywhere. We take ideas all the time. I never pass up a chance to ask somebody, how do you like the product? What can we do? How can we make it better? Any idea I can get to make their lives easier and make it safer for them to fight these fires is really what we're striving to do.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to bring a number of different questions in that we've gotten
Okay.
over the course of the presentation. Before that, though, I'll shift to gallery view just to say who we have on the recording. If you would wave at the screen, if your camera's on when I mention you. From our club, we have Rory in Texas, we have Mike in California, we have Shags in California, we have Cecilia in Italy, and we have Jens in Germany. Also joining us from Perimeter Solutions across Georgia, New Jersey, and Wisconsin are Dan, Barbara, Dan, and Felicia. And so good to have all of you with us as well. So first question, just as a way of specifying, a piece that I want to make sure is kind of obvious to people, or at least it's obvious to me. When we talk about having a high visibility fire retardant, that is specifically to be able to see where fire retardant is landing as a part of efforts to fight a fire, right? Or is there a different or complementary reason related to having the retardant be visible in that fashion?
Yeah, it's generally for aerial application, right? So the pilot lays his line down. Maybe there's a next air tanker that's coming in after that initial line, and they need to be able to tag onto that. So that is the main reason. But then there's also, we've heard ground crews that want to apply it because they want to make sure a week later they may come back and apply it. But if it's uncolored, well, did we already apply it there? It's kind of that thing. Or, there's two different crews that come in. So it really is just a physical way to see where it's been applied. Sometimes ground crews, they're calling in air support. They go into an area, there may be retardant already laid there. So it makes it easier for everybody, the pilots, the people on the ground. And really that's the main reason, is just to visibly be able to see where it has been applied.
Okay. So several questions came in about, and I think this would apply to both the retardant and perhaps the coloring in the retardant. Are there any concerns in terms of the toxicity for people who are fighting the fire, or for wildlife in the area, or anything like that?
Yeah, so of course we always get this question, right? And it's a very important one. I mean, I'm part of the community too. It's always something that we're thinking about when we're developing products. I take my kids hiking. I want to make sure that the forest and our communities are safe. The Forest Service, I mentioned the U.S. Forest Service specification. They do a very good job of analyzing the products for safety. They do mammalian toxicity, fish toxicity. That goes through a whole ecological risk assessment. And so all of those things have been addressed and been analyzed for safety through the U.S. Forest Service. And so nothing gets on that QPL unless it's gone through that process.
The idea that that these kinds of retardants with a really good rain essentially are washed off, and once sun comes back out and everything dries, it needs to be reapplied to be effective. First of all, did I summarize that properly?
Yes.
Okay. When we think about the runoff, there isn't anything about runoff and toxicity that becomes an issue, is there?
We're doing studies now. So we've done a study and it showed was that after maybe, it depends on the rain, but usually in Southern California, the second rain event, there's no traces of any retardant left at all. The good thing about retardants, they're phosphate based, which naturally is a fertilizer. So what you'll see is that a lot of it'll break down with plants and nutrients, and so there's really no risk in the runoff with the successive, the different rain events that occur.
Okay. All right. Looking at the questions in the chat, I'll kind of shift gears to talking about fighting fires more generally. I assume you work in partnership with organizations like CAL FIRE and
Yep.
similar crowds. I was listening just recently to a pilot podcast about things related to being a pilot in an aircraft that is designed to fight fires, right? And they were talking about how is it that some fires get so big so quickly if they're reported, so the question in the chat from Mike, mentioned the mosquito fire going from 3,000 acres to 30,000 acres over a 3-day period. What do you know about how they work to attack fires early? I mean, what challenges do they have to keep fires from spreading quickly, and how do your products work into that?
Oh, that's a good question. So my understanding of it is, as fires have started to get bigger and you get these meg fires, I've seen transition from kind of letting the ground crews do the work and kind of, laying the bulldozer lines. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects to fighting fire. And the things that I've noticed over the years is that they're attacking fires, what we call initial attack, stronger, quicker, to prevent it from getting out of control. I think, as far as from an aerial application standpoint, there's only so many aircraft available. So you have a year, this year has been a little bit less intense, but where your resources are stretched so thin that there may not be aircraft available because there's a bigger fire somewhere else in another part of the country, so I mean there could be hundreds of fires, thousands of fires going out at a time, and you only have maybe 40 aircraft or 30, whatever the case, whatever the number is. I can see how those resources get stretched. For example, this year I know they've been fighting fire very aggressively, and I think that's why they've been able to get a handle on these fires quicker, because of that direct attack and initial attack. The fire retardant is just a tool to help the firefighters do their job. I mean, fire retardant's not putting out the fire, it's slowing it down so those ground crews can really get in there and do their job, because that's really what we're aiding from the air. And sometimes there's terrain that just they can't get into, and that's where the aerial applications come in.
Well, speaking specifically of terrain issues, I was on a hike recently when an interpreter, a state park interpreter, was talking about how a decision 100 years ago to clear cut an area meant that the existing root systems in that area were sending these big trees up much more densely packed than they would have been had it been left naturally, right? So you end up with many more trees. I guess that's basal area or something like that in an area. And so does that affect how you think about the effectiveness of the retardants? So if there are loads and loads of trees, does that keep it from getting to the ground where it's most effective, or does canopy not really affect the effectiveness of the retardants in that way?
Definitely canopy does affect, I think. You have different fuel types, right? Fuel models, you have grasses versus shrub versus heavily dense forest. And yeah, we always think of that. And we really want to develop products that you don't have to switch out depending on what type of fuel type you have, right? It's a one-stop shop. And a lot of that is not just the product itself, but it's height of delivery, like in coverage levels. So the airplanes, they have a system in their tanks that they could do different coverage levels. So grass is maybe a lower coverage level where you're not just dumping a bunch of retardant on it. And really, ideally, you want to get the height of the aircraft higher. So you don't want to drive the retardant into it. You want it to rain down on it, like a vertical rain. And it's very interesting. The first time I had ever seen a drop on the ground, I thought there would be puddles and just a large amount. And I went and I'm like, there's little, like, you got a paintbrush and it's, kind of went like that along the wall, and it was like splattered polka dots. And I was like, wow, this actually prevents the spread of fires. It was just amazing to me to see how little amount of that actually works. So yeah, we always take it into consideration. And it's the same thing with the color, right? When we were thinking about the color, yeah, you could see it fantastic on a dry grass, but what happens when you get in a dense, canopy cover green? I mean, you really had to find that perfect color that would work in any situation. And we did some very creative things to replicate that. Overall, it worked, but yeah, we're always thinking of different types of fuel types, and that's where that communication with the rest of the fire safety community comes into play. The pilots, the aircraft, companies, the agency folks, because we don't always think of those ideas, and we need to get that feedback from them.
Another great question in the chat from Mike. When structures are threatened, is there anything about the use of the retardants that becomes part of the decision on when to use them, when it's an area where there are structures, as opposed to forests or something like that?
I think for structure protection, it's more of a preventative thing, where the aerial application, right? That's when there's a fire present, it's already going, they're actively trying to suppress that fire. Whereas something like structure protection, ideally you'd want to apply that before there's, the fires at your doorstep. You can apply it weeks and months before and really get that protection from that. So I think there's a little bit of a different mindset on how that's applied. For me, it's more of a prevention and protection thing versus an actively fighting the fire during the heat of the moment. Can
you give me a general idea of the what you do in terms of a product for firefighting organizations versus what you do for individuals using it because they want to put it in their home. And I mean that from the perspective of, is 90% of your business firefighting organizations and 10% consumers, or do you see consumer demand for these kinds of products rising or anything along those lines?
I don't know about the percentages. I would say yes, majority of the percentage is for agency use. I think that, because it wasn't always available to in commercial use. It was, you could only get it, it was only sold to agencies. And so, we did start getting the phone calls and, hey, can I get some of this? So we started to realize there was a need for that. And the way we develop it really isn't any different. The products that are sold in commercial to the homeowners, they all go through that Forest Service qualification process too. We don't skip that. That's an important piece of what we do, and to make sure that those products are safe and effective, we make sure that we send them through the same exact process, and we think about it in the same way when we're developing it. We don't say, oh, it's just for the consumer, let's not deal with the Forest Service specification. No, we put through everything through that process.
Okay, great. Well, we're running down on time. So what I'll do is I'll finish off with kind of the usual logistics and then hand it back to you for a final word. Anything that you kind of want in the minds of the people who've watched the recording as they finish up the video. But for all of you who have joined us, thank you very much for spending a little time catching the stories that we share. We're really glad to be able to share such a variety of stories with the world about how people are approaching different ways to improve their communities. We hope that as Rotarians, those of you who are Rotarians joining us, you'll also fill out the attendance form, letting us know where you're from. You properly type in your email address, and that'll generate an email that you can use to make up a miss with your own club. Pass that along to the secretary, and that works. And for everybody, at the bottom, you'll see our discuss forum. And that forum is a place where we, in an online and asynchronous club, can share ideas with each other. It's one of the many ways that we connect with our colleagues in the club. And we want to know what you think. What did you think of this program? What did you think of other elements of the meeting? Do you want to respond to something somebody else has said? You're perfectly willing, perfectly happy we are perfectly happy for you to do that. So thank you again. And we hope that you will both let us know you were here and leave a comment as well. As we always like to do, we hand it back to the speaker for the final word. So Melissa, I hand it back to you.
Thank you. Just thank you again for having me. Appreciate the time. For more information, please visit our website. It's perimeter-solutions.com, and you can see and read about the company that's behind the red stuff that comes out of airplanes. And not only that, we offer a variety of other solutions, Class B foams for Class B fires, and look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Melissa. And everyone, thank you. We'll see you next week.